Hey there, everybody. I'm Jeff, your tabletop technician here on the Dice Tower, continuing Jeff Week, which also turned out to be Jeff Weekend, and now we're kind of in the next Jeff Week, but it's fine. You know, I've got a little embargo on the Dice Tower channel. No big deal. But I am wrapping up my top 100 here, coming in 20 to 11. But a fun little fact for you, this is actually the last segment of this series that I'm filming because of my back and forth trips to the cabin. So one thing that I think I forgot to say in the top 10, and I want to go ahead and cover now, is that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this series, this was a little difficult for me to do. I have not played all the games. So if by the end of this series, especially after you watch the top 10, feel free to throw out any suggestions of maybe games that you didn't see on this list that you think might be a good fit for me and my play style. So with that being said, let's kick off the list. You know what? No list in this series is complete without some space games, and this one is certainly no exception because my number 20 is Wormholes by AEG and designer Peter McPherson. This is a fairly lightweight, approachable pick-up and deliver game set in space where players have a small spaceship moving around this hexagonal grid that varies from game to game, and they are trying to pick up passengers from various planets and drop them off at other planets. And they're using this very slow-moving ship that can typically only move 3 little hexes on their turn. However, those ships also have the ability to deploy wormholes, and eventually you will set up this complex network of wormholes all around space, and you'll be able to start zipping from planet to planet all over the place in a mere blink of an eye. And it is that unique challenge of how to build your network that I have always found so compelling with this game. I have tried versions where you have sort of a central hub, you have one end of all of your wormholes in a cluster and the other end at different planets, and so you can just kind of jump back and forth however you need. I've also tried to set up a sort of a series, a circuit if you will, where you jump from one planet, go to your next wormhole, jump to the next planet, and sort of build this, like I said, almost like a racetrack around the galaxy. And I've had varying success with either. The game is so simple. This is a fast teach. I love the artwork. I love the basic but functional components, and I've just always had a ton of fun with this game. And honestly, my biggest complaint with it is I wish it was longer. I would love to just sink some serious time into trying to build a super complex network of wormholes. I also love the fact that you can use other players' wormholes, but you're feeding them some points in doing so. All around, just a very, very fun game. One that I love to break out with more casual game groups, or if you're kind of winding down at the end of a game night. Also very good for cons. A fantastic game. Wormholes, my number 20. If number 20 was a casual pickup and deliver game, my number 19 is really anything but, because this is Robot Quest Arena. Now, I was only introduced to this game back in the 2023 Dice Tower Retreat, played it with some good friends of mine I've mentioned already, Katie and Greg Barley of the Meeple Society, and we just went to town on each other in this game. This game is reminiscent of the old TV series of BattleBots, where players represent a 3D colored little robot miniature, and you're moving around this square grid, just literally beating the tar out of each other. You're getting weapons, hammers, guns, all kinds of stuff. Very silly and cartoonish looking, but the overall idea is to go and just try and damage as many robots as you possibly can. And when you do damage a robot, you take their point of health and it becomes a victory point to you. And so what's so nice about this is that it's not necessarily about taking out other players. There's no permanent death in this game. There's not even any real penalty to getting knocked out in this game. You just respawn on your next turn and you get right back into the fight. And for someone who's not very fond of take that games, this just absolutely works for me because of the fact that it's not super aggressive. It is aggressive, but again, there's no real downside to it. You never really feel like you're getting ganged up on. Even when you are getting ganged up on, you're just fueled to get back in there and start wailing on other robots. And that is one of the reasons why I have had an absolute blast with this game. My daughter loves playing it. It's a game that she can just go out and start hosing on her parents, and it's a blast. Love this game. Number 19, Robot Quest Arena. You know, I think I'll keep this trend going of very dissimilar themes at the top of this list because my number 18 is Brew Crafters by Ben Rossett. Now, this is a game about running a brewery, and as much as I've understood when I was first introduced to this game, Ben's idea was to try and build something similar to Agricola. It's a worker placement game. You're working with a somewhat limited market. Only one person can ever go to each market stall in each round, and then every year in this game, you have to pay the bill, similar to feeding your family in Agricola. However, unlike Agricola, this game doesn't accelerate to that finish. You don't have to start paying the bills more and more frequently as you do in Agricola. And so it makes the game at least a little bit more relaxing in that particular aspect. There's still a ton of things you need to be able to do in this game. You need a lot of access to supplies and ingredients, especially as that game ramps up. And I've just always had a lot of fun with this. This is one of the first games I ever acquired, which again, it's a fairly heavy game to start off with. There's also a bajillion components in this game, 215 beer batch tokens, 130 ingredient cubes. And this is also a game I've blinged out with some extra ingredients, some 3D printed inserts, and more. This was honestly my original number one. From very early in my sort of gaming hobby, this game, because of its theme, I used to be a very avid home brewer, and so this game just spoke to me so much, and I absolutely loved playing it. It's obviously fallen down the list here a little bit. I just don't get it to the table quite that often, but still a game that I really just love to immerse myself into every chance I get. My number 18, Brew Crafters. One more? Can we fit one more very dissimilar game into this list? Well, I'm gonna, because my number 17 is Life of the Amazonia by Bad Comet Games. Ironically, the second game on this list that I was introduced to at last year's Dice Tower Retreat. This is a bag building game where each player is trying to build their own area of the Amazon rainforest, and you'll be trying to acquire animals, place those animals into your rainforest, and each animal has different endgame scoring requirements, whether they want to be near other animals, be in certain environments, maybe be around trees or water flowers, so on and so forth. And you're doing all of this by collecting these tokens. They go into your bag, and they're just giving you the resources that let you do any of these actions, whether it's acquiring the animals, building out the rainforest itself, adding new trees, flowers, whatever. You're doing that through this bag building effort. And what I like about it is that the tokens that you use as you draw them, they go into a discard pile, which is an adorable little wooden rowboat, and then eventually they'll go back into your bag. So it functions a lot more like a deck building game, which is fine because I think, as we've already established, I love deck building games. And so with the absolutely gorgeous table presence of this game and all of these systems firing off together, and I think just a perfect manner, I have really enjoyed this game. It has shot up this list. I've enjoyed every play of it that I've had, and it just looks fantastic. I don't even mind the little 3D waterfall in the corner. So anyways, that's my number 17, Life of the Amazonia. Okay, it's finally time for me to revert to type and bring out another space game. And this one, honestly, I'm surprised climbed as high as it did, because my number 16 is none other than Voidfall by David Turczi and Nigel Buckle. This is a game that, you know what, I've reviewed here on the Dice Tower channel not that long ago, put a ton of work into producing that video, and had a lot of criticisms of it. And I still have those criticisms, let me be very clear. This takes way too long to set up. It is far more complex than it really needs to be, but it is still an incredibly thinky puzzle, and I really appreciate the efficiency puzzle of this game. And that's a term that I've used a lot throughout this series. I really like games that make me think, okay, I can do this right now and I can get something done. But if I wait another turn or two, maybe set a few more things in place, then I can do an even bigger turn, maybe 2 or 3 turns from now. And of course, there's always that pressure of, well, maybe an opponent will grab that technology that I'm trying to get to. Maybe they'll conquer that system that I'm trying to get to. And weighing those odds, those pros and cons of each one of your moves, is what this game does in spades. And it's what I really enjoy about it, despite the fact that it's big and clunky clunky and a little slow and a little overly complex and all of those things. And so I went through this list several times. I redid my top 100 list a couple times, and this one kept coming out towards the top, which certainly means it deserves to be here. My number 16, Voidfall. My number 16 was a space game. My number 15 is a space game. It's in fact the 14th space game of this list, the 8th deck builder, and the second game from Martin Wallace. This is Rocket Men by Phalanx Games. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Phalanx. I'm not even a huge fan of Martin Wallace. However, I do love a good space-themed deck builder, and this is that in spades. In this game, players represent nondescript space agencies launching a number of missions to the Earth, the Moon, and the Mars, which is a joke that I used when I first reviewed this out on the Dice Tower many years ago. I also used that video to introduce my first Lego character, Captain Legolia. Did some stop motion with this, and it really just kind of paved the way for new ideas for me to do in-game reviews. So this game means a lot to me. I mean, I love playing the game itself, but even just as a reviewer, this really sort of changed my mindset, and how I approach certain reviews. It's a great game. I love the deck building aspects. I love trying to equip yourself to launch these missions. There is a push your luck element, which I love the fact that you can mitigate and even maybe potentially completely avoid if you would like. But then, of course, you're running that risk of people getting missions done before you do, which gives them more points. And you may also be trying to get certain missions done before other players to trigger off some extra endgame points for you based on some special objectives that you may have received at the beginning of the game. The only downside I have seen to this is that players can starve out other players from the market. If they're just constantly buying cards and vaporizing that market before other players can really get to it, then they can just drag out the rest of the game and win at their own pace. There is no time-based end game trigger in Rocket Men. A little bit of a problem. Players just have to kind of make sure that they are equally visiting the market and trying to stay relevant in that deck building aspect of the game. Other than that, a fantastic experience. One of my favorite games, Rocket Men, number 15. I'm tempted to say now for something completely different, but honestly, we've already visited this theme in this list alone, because my number 14 is Die Tavernen im Tiefenthal, or The Taverns of Tiefenthal by Wolfgang Warsch. Now, this is a spiritual successor to the game of Quacks of Quedlinburg, a game that I can't stand to play. This one, however, is a deck building game, and unlike Quacks, where of course you kind of have to reset your bag in each round, you're just constantly cycling through this deck, and the cards in that deck can represent various patrons who are visiting your bar, also staff who are working the bar, even tables to expand the size of your bar. And it also has this delightful puzzle piece aspect where you're upgrading your tavern by flipping over these pieces, upgrading the amount of beer that you can hold, upgrading the amount of money that you can hold, the number of patrons that can visit you, and so on and so forth. And what's really neat is that all of these cards that you've acquired, the patrons who have become regulars at your bar, the staff that now work there, they're all worth points at the end of the game. And that's kind of what a lot of it just boils down to. Even eventually trying to get various noblemen to come into your bar, again, just further increasing the reputation of your tavern and acquiring the most points. I love this game, especially I love it a lot more than Quacks. For one thing, your bar never blows up in this game, and I'm certainly okay with that. And because of that theme also, it has just always been one of my favorite games. My number 14, The Taverns of Tiefenthal. I'm just amusing myself with the sheer variety of this list, because my number 13 is Mosaic, A Story of Civilization by Glenn Drover and Forbidden Games. And this one's fairly popular. I think a lot of folks will at least recognize this game. Obviously a civilization game with a unique twist, I think, on the civilization aspect, in that it plays very quickly. The turns are quite snappy. On each of your turns, you're either generating resources, maybe you're discovering a new technology, building a new city, leveraging some taxes on your culture, all that kind of good stuff. And all that happens fairly fast. In fact, what's interesting with this game is that obviously this is the Colossus edition. It's a pretty big box, and it tends to just scare people. They kind of, I don't want to mess with that, looks like it's too heavy. but it's really not. It's not a very hard game to teach. The setup is quite lengthy. That's definitely a downside to it. In fact, I think it approaches Voidfall in terms of just how long it takes to set this thing up. But once you get into it, it's a very rewarding experience. I also really like the fact that, you know, there is this mindset of attacking, of war in this game, although it really just plays out like an area control mechanism. However, it often tends to be a distraction to most players. They'll often waste a lot of turns trying to amass the larger army in a region, while another player is simply building projects, researching technology, and will just clobber everyone with score at the end of the game. And that is one of the reasons why I find this to be one of my most enjoyable Civilization games. My number 13, Mosaic. You know what? We've been to space, we've been to Germany, we've been to the Amazon rainforest, we've had some drinks, we've had a pretty good time here, and I think it's time that we take this party underwater, because my number 12 is Underwater Cities by Vladimir Suchy. This is a game about trying to expand the residence of mankind under the big blue sea. It's another one of those giant deck of card games, right? Like Everdell, Wingspan, Terraforming Mars, Ark Nova, and many more, in that you're using these cards, you're placing a worker token out to take an action from the board, and then hopefully playing a matching card, a card of the matching color, I should say, to take an action from that card as well. Sometimes that will trip you up, but usually you can always work something out. What makes this game work with that giant deck of cards is that they are broken up into different eras. So at the beginning of the game, you get Era 1 cards, then Era 2, and Era 3. And that means that you're always working with cards that you can effectively use. You're not sitting there at the beginning of the game with a couple of cards that you will need several turns before you can even begin to think about playing them. Everything is useful to you from turn 1. And that means that players have a lot more agency, they have a lot more opportunities open to them, and they have plenty of time to think about all the other things that they're trying to get done in this game. They're not stuck with cards that they can't use. And that is something that has always made this an appealing puzzle, an appealing challenge. A game that I just love to sink myself into. Yes, pun intended, and I made that up on the spot. I'm pretty happy with that one. And just try to figure out this puzzle. Try to do the most with it. Try to make the most successful engine. I love this game. Underwater Cities, my number 12. All right, here we are, just one away from the top 10, and my number 11 is possibly one of the most unique games on this entire series. This is Forests of Pangea by Thomas Franken. This is a game that I reviewed here on the channel a good while ago. This was a Kickstarter project that I just decided to jump in on, and the first time I played this, it was really, really weird. And the second time I played it, it all started to make sense. This is just an incredibly unique game about trying to build swaths of forests across this board. You have these different environment tiles, different biome tiles, and as you're growing trees on these environments, you're getting resources of those different environments, and then you're using those resources to continue to grow the trees, and then you're eventually conducting these rituals, which will give you points based on the requirements of that ritual, whether it is a path across different environments, having the largest tree in a certain environment, and so on and so forth. The timing of this game is really unique. You're growing seeds in the trees, then possibly conducting rituals, and then trying to grow trees. And so again, you've got to really be mindful of how you do things, because you could find yourself with nothing left to grow if you're not doing things in the right order. There are also some variants in here that really just add some unique and interesting ideas to it. There's even a solo mode to this, which is, I think, bonkers, because the AI mode in the solo game basically plays the game in reverse. It's fully built out on the table at the start of the game, and you're trying to collapse it back onto a player board, essentially bringing it back to how a player would start the game in order to win the game yourself. I know I keep using the word unique, but this is it's a game I would almost call weird, right? Except for that, like I said, after you get a play or two in of it, it clicks with you. And everyone that I have introduced this to has just found it to be a very immersive, unique, challenging experience. I love the way this game looks on the table. I love the way this game plays. My number 11, The Forests of Pangea. That's it for the top 20. We're going to get to the top 10, possibly even later on today. I know there's a weird schedule. Let's see how it goes. Cheers.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video from the Dice Tower. Hey, you want to learn more about us, communicate with us? We have a Facebook group, we have a Discord channel, lots of different ways to get involved with the Dice Tower. And you can find that in our Linktree link below. So just click that, it will take you and you can communicate with us on Facebook, join our Facebook groups. There's lots of cool things that you can find and become part of the Dice Tower. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Vasel.